Hey guys, it's Joe. I hope everyone's doing great out there. Coming at you tonight with a horror movie review. And tonight we are going to be reviewing The Conjuring 2. Now, of course, The Conjuring 2 is the follow-up movie to The Conjuring. Which, if you guys haven't seen that, definitely recommend going and checking out The Conjuring. That was a movie I think that surprised a lot of people with how well it did. I mean, that movie made a ton of money, which was great for the horror genre. And also bad for the horror genre because that movie spawned a lot of bad ghost story movies. But, it brought the mainstream audience into horror, which was good. I mean, whenever you can bring horror into the mainstream, it's a good thing. And The Conjuring definitely brought horror into the mainstream. A lot of people who usually don't go see horror movies went and saw The Conjuring. Like I said, it made a ton of money, so you knew a sequel was coming. Now, The Conjuring 2 deals with the Enfield poltergeist, which is a pretty famous case. If you can go and do some research on it. It is, part of the Ed and Lorraine Warren case files. Of course, Ed and Lorraine Warren. They, are probably most famous for the Amityville horror case. They researched that. They're paranormal investigators. Retired now. Ed passed away. Lorraine is still living. And she actually does a haunted museum tour of her occult museum, which is super interesting. It's somewhere in the Northeast. I want to say like New York or somewhere like that. But you actually can go and tour that. It is a good amount of money. I've looked up doing it before. Haven't pulled the trigger on doing it, but if that's something that interests you, definitely go and Google that. You might be able to find some information on that. But The Conjuring 2, of course, Enfield poltergeist. A very famous case that took place in England. Like I said, go do some research on it if you want. But, so we pick up with Ed and Lorraine Warren. Basically examining the Amityville case in the beginning of this movie, which is super interesting. But then we get right into the Enfield poltergeist part of this movie. I'm not going to go too deep into plot just because, spoiler free. This movie just got released. I want you guys to go and see it for yourselves. But basically it focuses on another family, very similar to the first. No husband this time, but, a mother and her 4 children. And basically, some paranormal stuff starts happening, and Ed and Lorraine get called in once again, like they did in the first movie. And we'll stop from there. So I'll stop plot there and just go into my thoughts of the movie. And overall, guys, I gotta say it was a pretty enjoyable movie. I definitely had some problems with it, and I will address some of that in this review. But overall, definitely solid. People I'm hearing are saying they thought this was better than the first Conjuring. I disagree with that. I thought the first Conjuring was a better movie, but this one was still very solid. I'll say James Wan, who directed this, of course, famous. He directed the first movie as well, and he directed Saw, and he's done some other stuff. That guy knows how to make a good horror movie. He knows how to effectively scare the audience without having to put in cheap jump scares all the time. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some jump scares in this movie, of course, but he also does very subtle scares, which really work. And I think some, horror directors could really take note of what James Wan does in, the first Conjuring and in this Conjuring. Not every scare has to be a jump scare to scare a viewer, and James Wan does quite a few of those scares in this movie that work really, really well, very effective. Just the sense of dread alone, I think, puts some fear into the viewer. And, it doesn't need to be in your face. And that worked really well in this movie. And, the cast is, besides, Patrick Wilson, Vera Farmiga, who played Ed and Lorraine Warren, other than that, pretty much a unknown cast. I did not recognize the children or the mother from anything, but very well acted movie, pretty good story. My big issue with this movie is the running time. This movie is 2 hours and almost 15 minutes long, way too long for a horror movie. This movie definitely dragged in parts. I never felt it like slow though, but I did feel it dragging in certain areas, which I was like, they totally could have cut this part out. They could have cut an easy 40 minutes of this movie to, they could have brought this movie down to a hour 45 minute running time. And honestly, you would not have had a much different movie. So I think for some reason, I don't know why the studio decided to go with such a long movie. But they could have made some more cuts to this movie. Definitely could have cut out some of the scares, and it still would have been just as effective. But it doesn't completely hinder the movie. But I did find myself at times being like, wow, this is dragging on a little bit. But overall, guys, an enjoyable movie. I had been teetering between my score of what I wanted to give this. I'm somewhere between a 7 and an 8 in this movie. In the end, I think I'm going to give it a 7.5. Is it worth going to see in theaters? If you really enjoyed the first Conjuring, I would say yes. I did enjoy this movie. I might be beating it up a little too much. But just, the running time killed it a little bit. And getting towards the ending there, I felt like the climax was a bit rushed. And there were a couple of scenes that kind of made my eyes roll on the cheese factor a little bit. But overall, guys, a definite enjoyable movie. One I would definitely recommend. I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10. Will it make my top 5 or 10 horror list this year? It very well may, honestly. It definitely was an enjoyable movie, but not as good as the first Conjuring. So 7.5 out of 10. For The Conjuring 2. If you did see The Conjuring, let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. And that is it, guys. So I hope everyone has a great night, and we'll see you all real soon.